Hello, welcome to this showcase about the MSc Psychology uh, program that we have here in the University of Leicester. My name is Dr. Robin Green. I'm an Associate Professor of Psychology here in the University of Leicester, and I am the program lead for the MSc Psychology campus-based program. I also contributes to the distance learning version of the same program. But as I say, most of the stuff I'll be talking about is about the campus-based course. But since the courses are very similar in the distance learning and campus-based versions, I can answer some questions on both if that's needed. So I do have a little PowerPoint presentation, so I can talk through, what the core elements of the course are, and then after my little presentation, happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I'll just give me seconds just to share my screen. Then, so hopefully now, just give it a moment. Voila. So you should see a screen right now. So this is the program about the MSc Psychology. And that's my name, Dr. Robin Green, and I'm part of the School of Psychology and Vision Sciences school here in the University of Leicester. So what is the MSc in Psychology? It's a program that's offered within the School of Psychology and Vision Sciences, and it's primarily a conversion course, primarily designed for those who have degrees which are not in psychology or have done very little psychology. So like they might have done a minor or a couple of modules in psychology, or they might have studied psychology in a non-UK university and so would like to learn psychology in the UK context. Those are the sort of primary things that sort of audiences for this course. And it's a conversion, so it basically goes through the fundamentals of psychology, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. What you need to get on this degree, you need a lower second class or a 2-2 honours degree or equivalent as a minimum entry to the program. Obviously, if you have higher, then that's great. As I say, it's available full-time on campus, which is the program that I lead, but it's also offered as a 2-year part-time via distance learning. So there are two different routes into doing the same degree, essentially. If you have studied at the University of Leicester before, this degree is eligible for the 20% alumni discount on the fees. So what is this MSc Psychology degree about? Well, it's 180 credits at master's level, or in the framework of higher education qualifications, it's at level 7. And this is comprised of 8 taught modules of 15 credits each. So those are your sort of foundation courses of psychological content and research, and a 60 credit empirical dissertation, which is the final area of the master's program. And the idea is it covers the foundation of psychology for people whose degree are not in psychology, and it's specifically designed to cover you in training in fundamental psychological thinking, knowledge, research, and communication skills. And for the campus-based course, it's a combination of lectures, interactive tutorials, workshops, and practical sessions, as well as supervision, particularly in the empirical dissertation. And there's a lot of practical and hands-on activities throughout the program. So there's it's quite an active program on the campus base. As I say, there's every taught module will have a combination of lectures and tutorials throughout. So what are the program aims? So our program aims is to develop knowledge of psychology and its relevance through exposure to key theoretical and methodological approaches and research evidence. Also, we've designed this curriculum so that it meets the appropriate British Psychological Society accreditation criteria for graduate basis for chartership through a variety of different learning activities. And also, the final aim is to develop intellectual and research skills appropriate for the level of study, including critical and systematic approach to the evaluation of evidence. So a big part of master's level study is that you are not just taking evidence, but you're critically evaluating evidence. And we will teach you that in the course. How do you apply evidence to different scenarios? How do you solve problems in different contexts? As well as how do you make evidence-based decisions. And don't worry if you haven't done any of that in your previous degree. You will be taught these as though you've never studied them before. So we go through really basic stuff from reading a research paper. How do you analyze it? How do you do evaluation? How do you make judgments? How do you communicate those judgments? The psychology degree has fundamental core areas that we have to cover as part of meeting these sort of minimum standards. And these are very much the foundations of psychology. So you'll learn about the conceptual and historical issues of psychology. So where did psychology begin? From its philosophical and historical roots, what issues pertain in psychology? Equally, where's psychology going? What are the issues that psychology is facing in society? For example, use of artificial intelligence, and how does psychology grapple with that? How does psychology grapple with things like ethical conundrums and political debates, those sorts of things. Research methods, so it's one of the fundamentals of how we understand psychological research, in that you learn about all the essential tools, so quantitative tools, so using numbers, statistics, and so you'll get taught how to do all that with appropriate software to create, understand, and interpret psychological data, but as well as qualitative data, so using people's words and text and analyzing those to create meaningful conclusions and answering research questions. Biological psychology is about the study of the brain and hormones, genetics, and how our biology influences our behavior. So, and things like from mental health to things like sleep, eating, aggression. How do we understand how we learn and what the various parts of the brain do? So you'll learn about that in biological psychology. In cognitive psychology, you learn about the cogs and wheels of the mind. So how do we process all this information that comes into our senses through our eyes, our nose, our ears, every part of our senses? How do we make sense of that? How do we perceive things? How do we learn? How do we remember and equally forget? Counting, things like how do we make decisions? How do we reason? How do we be flexible with our time? How do we multitask? Various different aspects of something called cognitive psychology. So how do we interpret information in the mind, as well as things like language, so reading and speaking and things like that. In social psychology, it's about how the individual relates to other people, either it be from one other person in terms of close relations, attraction, love, and but also how does an individual relate to a group? So how do people identify as, for example, to a sports team, to their country, to a faith, to a culture? And how do we respond to others? So, for example, obedience and defiance. How do we understand ourselves? How do we, label ourselves? How do we understand ourselves? Those are things that we would understand in social psychology. In developmental psychology, it's the psychology of change. So we look throughout the lifespan from pregnancy all the way to birth, early childhood, infancy, toddlers, middle childhood, sort of late childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, late adulthood, and of course, death and dying. So we look at what changes when, so both cognitively, so what cognitive processes develop, what physical changes happen, but also what social and personality changes happen throughout the lifespan. And of course, individual differences. So it's looking at personality. So how do some people seem to be more extroverted and really love going to parties and get all their energy from being with other people, while some people prefer to just to be like on their own, be fine with a quiet book and things like that. Looking at things like conscientiousness, so being like, what people's traits of hardworkingness, and equally these different aspects of personality and how that feeds into things like well-being, from how does our personality influence our health behaviors, both physical health as well as mental health. Equally, throughout the course, you'll learn about something called applied psychology or professional psychology, which I'll explain in a little bit. So in the terms of the campus-based course, which is the one that you're here for, they're structured in 3 parts. So the first semester part, you do 4 modules. So that runs from end of September to the beginning of January. And you will learn these 4 modules. So historical and conceptual themes. So that's really looking at the foundations of psychology, that conceptual and historical issues. Brain and behavior, so that's looking at biological psychology. Exploring mental processes, which looks at cognition and cognitive psychology. And investigating psychology, which looks into that sort of fundamental, the psychologist toolkit to how we investigate psychological phenomena, so sort of research methods. In semester 2, which is from sort of end of January, early February to May, you learn applied human behavior, so that's all the social psychology elements, lifespan development, so this is all the developmental psychology throughout the lifespan, and individual differences, so looking at personality and aspects related to personality and well-being. And professional psychology, we look into different career pathways in psychology and in how we can employ psychological skills in careers. So you'll learn about sort of the chartered careers in psychology, so things like clinical psychology, coaching psychology, health psychology, exercise psychology, etc., as well as how you can apply psychological skills beyond that in careers, in the workplace, for example. And then in the summer, you'll learn about something called the dissertation, which is where you get to create psychological knowledge. So you apply all the investigating psychology knowledge. You'll apply some of these things to answer a real, genuine research question in the psychology field, and you create a small project and write this up. Collecting data, analyzing data, and writing up in a report, like a sort of journal article that we would write in psychology, and that's done throughout the summer. If you're interested in the distance learning one, it's the same modules. It's throughout a sequential block of 1 module at a time. So with each block being 8 to 9 weeks long. So with year 1, you do 1 module in at a time. So you'll start with historical and conceptual themes, then you move into investigating psychology, then you'll move into brain and behavior, then you'll move into exploring mental processes, then individual differences, then applied human behavior. Again, it sort of goes in 8 9-week blocks. This is all online in the distance learning one. And then in year 2, you do lifespan development, then professional psychology, and then you end with the dissertation. This MSc is not just about learning psychological knowledge, whilst obviously that's the majority of the things that you will learn about, but you will learn about really important skills. So it's a very balanced degree in the fact that you learn lots of different things that you can apply in later careers as well as in further psychology training. So, for example, communication skills. You will have to learn how to communicate your ideas and your decisions and research in both written forms, in forms of reports or literature reviews, posters and things like that, as well as in giving presentations into small groups as well. You'll have to learn about group work, because psychology is very inherently quite a social discipline in the sense that we have to work with lots of other people. So you'll get to learn about how to do that as well, and you'll get to do that in addition. Self-reflection, so reflective skills. Self-reflection is an essential part for being well-rounded and up to date and competent psychologist. So you'll learn about how to do self-reflection and the sort of techniques that we do and how you can use that. Oral presentation skills, as I've mentioned earlier, is part of communication skills. So not just writing, but also giving presentations as well. Critical evaluation of evidence, an essential skill in psychology, as well as at master's level, to make evidence-informed judgment. So it's about making decisions based on the weight of evidence that you are able to find to make the best outcomes possible. Research design and implementation skills, so you will learn about how research is conducted, and then you will also be able to do different research projects. So you'll do a few research projects as well as the big dissertation. Statistical analysis and qualitative methods and qualitative analysis. You'll learn about ethical thinking. You're dealing with people. You need to know how to treat them with respect and dignity, and respecting their confidentiality and their integrity. So you'll learn about that sort of really key psychology professional skill. Project management and time management. You have to be able to organize your time. It's quite an intense course because we're essentially covering all the essential aspects of psychology in 1 year. You will need to manage your time very well. And so by doing this degree, you'll definitely learn how to do that. So if you take this MSc, where does it lead to? Well, all the essential skills will allow you to progress on to further professional training in psychology. So what we call stage 1 MScs in forensic psychology, health psychology, sport and exercise psychology, occupational psychology, or coaching psychology. So those things, if you wanted to become a professional psychologist in the future, you normally do something called a stage 1 master's or a stage 2 professional doctoral program in clinical psychology, counseling psychology, education and child psychology. But also it could lead to other masters and PhD programs. We've had people on this course go on to other postgraduate training as well as on PhDs. But learning about people and how people interact and how people think and being able to logically problem solve and use good evaluation skills is applicable in many other careers as well, from marketing, counseling, being a youth worker, being a psychological assistant. Basically any job that involves working with people, this MSc will definitely have some sort of help towards. Why do the MSc in psychology? Well, professional psychology is a doctoral level profession in the UK, and the MSc gives you this very broad range of skills, and this MSc gives you this really foundation for you to then progress up to doctoral level skills, but also it opens up lots of different possible career pathways. So business and management, things like human resources, marketing, training and learning and development, staff well-being. Psychologists work in these fields, entrepreneurship, sports, so being sports psychology and sort of dealing with athletes and professional athletes and how to and teams and how they can improve their performance. Health and well-being, so looking at mental health conditions, but also physical health conditions and how people cope with these. Social care, working with other people to ensure like better outcomes for them. Education, so making sure that whether it be children or even university students are supported in their education and scaffolding them and developing things to help them understand how they learn and thrive in the sector.